The Venetian by Nick Kine, from War Without End. I am dying. The flicking retinal display tells me my cybernetics are functioning, but I cannot move them. Without the flesh to impel it, iron means nothing. Without an engine to drive it, what use is the machine? For all its ostensible fortitude and resilience, I now discover that iron is just as weak as flesh. It is ironic that not only now does this revelation strike me. Julius is walking away from me, an arrogant cur. It takes me a moment to realize why he is upside down, and I see his armored heels disappearing into the distance. My tactical dreadnought armor has failed. I'm on my back, trying to hold in my guts. I'm not alone. The dead are everywhere, their ranks swelling with each passing second. Morlocks and funerary blacks surround me. I see snatches of iconography, a splash of blood. Their wounds are flesh, the legacy of them, and the wounds against this legion will linger long after this battle is ended. I will not see its end, though. I feel no regret or sadness. Anger fills me instead. Black well of hatred that I'm slowly slipping into. My head lolls to the side and I recognize a face. I rasp a name. The son! He does not answer. My brother is already gone. I'm trying to suppress a sense of fatalism that seizes my mind, just as the chill of death begins to seize my body. I want to believe that this can all end in victory, that we are not simply undone by a lie. And then I see him, emerging through a cloud of smoke, shimmering in the heat haze from 1,000 fires, the one whom he faces. Death is close, its hands around my throat, digging through my innards with eager talons, slit from abdomen to neck. The pain rivals anything I've ever felt before. I must hang on. I have to see this. Blackness crouches at the edge of my vision, and I'm content to let it, just as long as I can remain conscious. Two brothers face one another amidst an ocean of war, the dead lapping at their feet. One is stern, his eyes like pools of mercury, hair cut close to the scalp, cold and unyielding. His face is as craggy, as hard as a Medusan cliff, black as coal, with arms as pearlescent silver. He is brawn personified, with fresh forged vengeance. Horus Heresy, the Gorgon, my father. The other is slender, even his purple and gold armor, his unhelmed visage is handsome, the epitome of physical perfection. The long white hair streaks from his head like flashes of fire. He is my father's weapon, the great hammer forge breaker. As he climbs to a spur of rock, this vainglorious yet deadly peacock, his movements are swaggering and arrogant. Fulgrim, the Phoenician, my father's brother. Horus Heresy will kill him for this affront. As he strides towards the spur with purpose, the living making way for this clash while the dead linger underfoot, he draws Fireblade. It burns like his anger, righteously. Fulgrim's smile remains, his arms open as if to embrace the Gorgon. In truth, it's a mocking challenge. Below, my few surviving brothers of the Averni clan clash with the Phoenix Guard. Lightning Claw meets Helberg, and the death toll amongst the Morlocks and the Emperor's children rises. I black out for a few seconds. My eyes are bloody, and I witness the rest of the battle through a crimson filter that my retinal lenses cannot correct. Forge Breaker looks heavy, too noble of a weapon for Fulgrim's ignoble hands, but he wields it deftly, and I am reminded of his awesome prowess. My father speaks words of accusation, but my hearing is fading and I fail to catch them. His teeth are bared in a predatory snarl. Fulgrim's too, revealed in a liar's grin. From despair comes fury. Horus Heresy charges the spur, his brother upon it. My father is a brawler, brute strength, undeniable power. Fulgrim's technique is choreographed like a dancer's. Even with Forgebreaker, he is swift and precise. He rains blows down upon my father's defense, smashes him down again and again. Ferrus Manus' will not be bowed. Anger fuels him. Fulgrim feels the heat of it. His smile wavers, turning to an uncertain frown. I'm weakening, my body shutting down, my mind clinging on by the thinnest skin. I have to see this. I need to know. They circle, two demigods surrounded by the last of my dying kin. My father's pauldron is dented by a glancing blow. Return is quick and two-handed, leaving a fiery split in the Phoenician's warplate. The Gorgon recoils. The haft of Forge Breaker smashes into his pugilist nose. He replies with a downward slash that Fulgrim dodges. The second cut clips the Primarch's cheek and he snarls. He thrusts out with the hammer, a jab that punches the air from my father's lungs and leaves him gasping. A desperate cut keeps Fulgrim at arm's length as the Phoenician leaps back to avoid Fireblade stain. One-handed, Fulgrim loops the stolen hammer around for a murderous blow, but Ferrus Manus blocks it. Sparks cascade, lightning crackling from both weapons. I hear thunder and imagine the very earth trembling against the fury of this duel. For a moment they are locked, brother versus brother, Fireblade grinding against Forge Breaker's haft. With a roar, Ferrus Manus throws Fulgrim off, but the Phoenician is quick to recover. He spins away from the thrust, aimed at his chest, and lands a punch against the Gorgon's exposed jaw. He shrugs it off, draws a deep cut down Fulgrim's flank. Hard to tell for certain. My vision is starting to blur, and the pain has ebbed into a dull ache that will soon become endless cold. But I swear that the Phoenicians exhaled pleasure in that last. Truly, he is the prey. Mocking, laughter erupts from Fulgrim, and his arrogance, boundless even in the face of incandescent hatred. Savagely, my father lashes out, rips the shoulder guard from Fulgrim's otherwise pristine armor. If I could make a fist in triumph, I would. With the gathering momentum, the Gorgon turns aside the Phoenician's guard and makes a thrust with Fireblade. My eyes widen in anticipation of victory, but Fulgrim counters, faster than any warrior has a right to, and turns the blow aside before crafting one of his own that strikes my father's skull. Anguish rises in my blood, in my gorge, but I dare not look away. I could not, even if I wanted to. Ferrus Manus is staggered, bowed to one knee but resolute. Blood is streaming from his head, drenched him in a red shroud. Gritting his teeth, he finds a gap in the Phoenician's otherwise flawless guard and cuts deep across his torso. Fulgrim falls back, Forge Breaker no longer in his grasp as he clutches at his body. On their knees, they stare at one each other, but I am struck by the Phoenician's apparent melancholy. I suspect lucidity has already fled, for I look upon Fulgrim and see true sadness. It is usurped by the acceptance as Ferrus Manus rises to his feet. Fireblade hangs aloft like a frozen comet, burning. I'm about to commit myself to duty's end. Death has stayed its hand, and I am thankful for it. But the blow doesn't fall. I blink and wonder if I missed something crucial. The silver blade flashes in Fulgrim's grip. It halts Fireblade mid-swing. The burning sword is descending all the same. A harsh flash of light hurts my eyes, but I no longer have the strength to look away. An aura, dark and eldritch, has enveloped both Primarchs. I see Fulgrim on his feet, my father back on his knees, his armor parted as if it were parchment. I want to cry out, to rage at the wrongness of it. Fate has been thwarted, as near death I see it. I see the thing inside the Phoenician. It is writhing, serpentine, yet the flesh around it is staggering, bereft of its usual finesse. Fulgrim's eyes widen as they meet on their own. I see his terror. I see the desperate urgency in him that screams not to kill his brother. The blow falls. I cannot stop it. Iron skin shears apart, cleaved by amethyst fire. I detect a reek of something spoiled, rotten meat and old flesh. Rolling over the slopes, surging from unseen place, come katabatic winds. They flash over me, over the dead, and I hear the voices trapped within them. They're screaming. These are the voices within the screams beckoning me on. They come from the land of shadows, from Medusa, where remnants of old, long-forgotten lies still walk. They come for me, the slain warriors of Clan of Erdin, reaching out to take me with them, to grant me peace. I recoil as their faces change, as noble Medusan sons devolve into wraithly phantoms. Fingers weather into talons, eyes shrink into orbitless sockets. They seek to drag me into the darkness. I had just the will enough to deny them their soul feast. Upon the Isfahan plain, a chilling tempest rages, with my dead father and his killers at the heart of it. I see the essence of life leaving the Gorgon through his severed neck. His head lies separate from it, glassy-eyed and edged with rage. As the wind dies, I feel the torment just beginning. Fulgrim stoops, though it isn't the Phoenician. With one hand, he seizes my father's cropped hair and presents the bloody head to me. I do not see the Primarch. I behold the monster. My closeness to death has gifted me that truth. In that moment, as my heart beats its last and my final breath saws painfully through my lungs, I realize what faces us. I can see it clearly. I can see that that was the Phoenician, by Nick Kine, War Without End. Veritas Verum by David Annandale from Legacies of Betrayal. The explosions rippled along both flanks of the Veritas Verum. Blasts were twin broadsides as the Iron Hand strike cruiser drove between its enemies, with the Night Lords to port and Alpha Legion to starboard. There's no question of evasion. There's only for now a choice of foe. As the Veritas was bracketed by the fire of two smaller cruisers, her void shields flared with an intense brilliance of a newborn sun. The glare was so intense, for an instant, the oculus showed nothing but white blindness. Standing at his command lectern, Captain Duran Atticus raised his bionic rasp of a voice over the din of alarms and rumble of secondary blasts. Diamond report, Sergeant Gaba. Void shields collapse over the port side stern, Captain. Fire in the landing bay and in the surf barracks. Seal the sector, divert its power to the shields. Gobble looked up from his post delicately. Captain, the survivors! Atticus silenced the sergeant with a sharp gesture. They're dead anyway. Anyone in that sector is a casualty. Do not add to the numbers. Do it, damn you. Damn arithmetic of war. Damn Horus. Damn the turncoat cowards who are filling the near orbit of Isfahan 5 with the wreckage of ships, flames of treachery, and the ruins of the Emperor's dreams. Damn me too, Atticus muttered. Kobo paused over his controls. Captain? Nothing. But it wasn't nothing, was it? What he has said to his men, laughing with the bionic larynx of his, laughing, as the Veritas begun its journey through the warp to the Isfahan system. He had said that it was not true, that the legions knew no fear, because he had one great fear, his fear that they would arrive to find a Primarch Ferrus Manus had already crushed the War Master's rebellion without. After Kalanides, after Fulgrim's craven ambush, and after the warp storms had calmed, Lord Manus had raced hard toward Isfahan, taking the fastest, least damaged ships and filling them with his most experienced Avernii veterans. Atticus had given over half of his complement of warriors to the Primarch's folly, but now the Veritas Verum had finally dropped out of warp at the Isfahan system's Mandeville Point and into a vision of hell. Atticus descended from the lectern and strode towards the oculus. Littering the far orbit of Isfahan's star was the graveyard of loyalist ships. Some had been caught as they attempted to escape, but many more were simply torn apart by enemy fire as soon as they emerged from the Immaterium. The Iron Hand's second wave has been virtually obliterated. Hard to starboard, he ordered, sweeping his eyes over his crew. Will none of you ask me if I'm relieved that my fear has not come to pass? The battle was not over, but the terrible truth was that it seemed as though it may soon be. He jabbed his finger at the nearest enemy ship, hove into view as the Veritas began its turn. I want everything hitting that Alpha Legion bastard. If he still had lips, he would have parted them in a murderous smile. So the individual is unimportant, is it, Alvarius? He said. He spat. Then what we're going to do will not hurt you at all. With the slow majesty of a glacier, the Veritas rounded on its prey. The Alpha Legion ship, the Theta, tried to evade by rising above the ecliptic, but it was too slow, too late. Concentrated lance and torpedo fire from the Veritas overwhelmed its buoy shield. They went down in a flickering cascade. The Theta's running light died just before the Iron Hand's main barrage struck it amidships. The blow was devastating. The Theta broke in half. Galva called out from the station. The Nightlord's vessel is firing again! Noted, Sergeant. Countermeasures. Atticus looked at the bisected cruiser before them. Hansman, take us through. The prow of the Veritas Ferrum drove through the dissipating fireball where the core hull of Theta had been. Two sections of the Alpha Legion vessel seemed to fold in on the Veritas in an embrace of the void. There was a glancing impact that brought down the starboard prow shields, but then the Veritas was clear. Behind them, the Night Lord's vessel's flank was exposed to the wreckage. The ship was maneuvering into an evasive turn, but there was no time. The shattered rearward bulk of the Theta slammed into it, lighting up the void as her reactor went critical. The sound came from Atticus' voice box. It was a growl of satisfaction. Sergeant Galba, shields holding, just. Ahead was a clear path. Atticus turned to the box operator. Any word from the drop site? Nothing I can confirm, Captain. They had received only fragmentary box chatter since their arrival, broken distress calls from voices that claimed to be Iron Hands, lamenting the death of their Primarch, but never any direct responses to hails from the Veritas. Atticus returned to the command lectern. No more lies, then. And he would not believe that Ferrus Manus had been killed, not unless he saw the Primarch's body before him. Perhaps not even then. He would not believe it, yet deep down, he knew there was nothing here left to salvage from the drop site. He felt his soul filling with the hatred that he knew he would carry to his grave. Galba's aspect blared at proximity alarm. Capital ships, dead ahead! Atticus could not sigh anymore. So much of the weak flesh was gone, the many basic human mannerisms given up and replaced by the strength of metal. So he did not sigh. He tightened his fists instead, bending the rails around the lectern. We must retreat. If we do not, if nothing of the loyalist forces survive the slaughter at the surface, what then? What then for our legion? The box operator whirled to face the lectern. Signal! Thunderhawks! 2 outbound from the debris field, requesting aid. The war arithmetic loomed before Atticus once more. Put it on the main speaker. Static crackled through the open channel, then came a voice. This is Sergeant Kadim, Salamanders, 139th Company. Our carrier vessel was destroyed. We need recovery. Atticus looked at the tactical hull list before him. So few allied ships left. The Veritas was the only one close enough, even with the illusion of freedom to act. But the arithmetic was unforgiving. I'm sorry, Sergeant. Cannot help you. This is the 10th Legion strike cruiser, Veritas. We have a number of your brothers, and those of the Raven Guard aboard. We've lost men to save them. Is that worth nothing? Do you have a prime light? It's a long moment of silence. No. Then I regret. 3 legions have fought for the Emperor, and now face annihilation. Are they to be abandoned, the sacrifice forgotten? Will you grant the traitors an absolute victory? Will there be no witnesses to what has been done this day on Isfan 5? Atticus cursed. He cursed Kadim. He cursed the entire galaxy. Hensman, set a course to intercept. Recover those ships. He hated the piece of his soul that yet rejoiced at this decision. He wished he had replaced it with Bionics too. The Veritas Ferrum closed with the Thunderhawks. On both flanks, the great warships of the Sons of Horus and Emperor's Children were approaching, a noose closing around the Iron Hands. The Veritas slowed down to take on the 2 gunships, even as the traitors opened fire. The starboard landing bays were closing when the torpedoes struck a mid-port side, and then terrible damage had become catastrophic. Explosions were thunder that built upon thunder. Atticus felt the ship's wound through the command interface like a blade scraping the length of his ribs. The bridge clactions where the Veritas screamed in pain. But the Iron Hands still had the vector of escape. Atticus pounded the railing of the command lectern. Go! He ordered. The Veritas ran. The tear in his flank was huge. It bled air, flame, and tiny armored fingers. figures into the void. The ship was rocked by yet another torpedo hit. Galba hunched over his post as though the screams themselves were his enemy. Fire spreading, Captain! Over 100 legionaries lost to the void. Many times more than the Thunderhawks were transporting. I'm sure our guests are worth it. He felt it then. The final excision of mercy from his being, the last weakness, killed one battle too late. And now, with only one desperate path remaining, a calmness as cold as the grave descended upon him. Back the jump. Galba was staring at him. Captain, the hull is compromised. Back the jump now! The Veritas Ferrum's warp engines flared. Leaping, the ship plunged into reality's scream, and Atticus gazed into the maw of a future as pitiless and uncertain as he. That was Veritas Ferrum by David Annandale. Strike and Fade by Guy Haley from Legacies of Betrayal. Where there had once been many sons of Nocturne, now there are only 4. Brother Jofor, Grim Highfast, and young neophyte Gosol, and the ever-silent Donok. They crouched among the rocks above the trail. None knew the others well, and that they had come together at all amidst the turmoil of the massacre was as great a miracle as any. They had spoken whispers. They dare not use the wider box neck for days. Their voices barely carried above the wind and Donok's repetitive sharpening of his combat blade. Gosol flexed his shoulders, stretching his numb limbs. Will they come? Jofor quieted him with raised hand. Patience, neophyte, and stay still. Your motion will trace to the enemy. Gosol's face reddened in high, fast words. I'm sorry, masters. Don't be sorry. This is not how your training should be. But you'll be stronger for it. The scout nodded. High Fast grunted bitterly. If we live. The older warrior had no patience for the youth, whether it was his nature or merely anger at the recent atrocities they had witnessed. Jofor could not yet tell. Brother, mine the spirit of the neophyte. What of our spirits? My dreams are tapestries of gross betrayal, our brothers slaughtered by those they once called friend. Just have a care for the lad. Jofor sighted down his weapon to where the improvised explosives had been planted. I worry more for Donok. He has not spoken at all since we found him. The flames of his eyes are low. The forges of his hearts have been quenched. I fasted past them. You see, there are things too great for even a space marine to bear. Yet, tell me you are untouched by it. Jofor spoke so quietly, his voice was barely audible. I'm not untouched, brother. My heart's ache. My mind cannot contain the enormity of this slaughter. My eyes are sore with sorrow. He turned to Hyphas. But my rage outmatches it all. We 4 are of different companies within the Legion, granted, but all of us were born of fire and fury. Our brotherhood is unshakable. It is succor for the elite. Power. Let all of the legions turn upon the sons of Nocturne. Nothing can break the bonds between us. There will come a reckoning. That is all I can say to any who doubt us. Hyphas nodded solemnly. When he spoke, he was calmer. That is why we follow you, brother. All is not lost, said Jofor. That traitors spend so much time scouring this particular area gives me hope. I do not believe that we are the last servants of the Emperor on Isfan 5. Behind his visor, Hyphas chuckled. And if we are, Jofor shifted. Then we will fight to the very end. Silence now. The Night Lords are coming. They held themselves still as the rocks around them. They waited until the faint sound of engines reached their enhanced ears. Gosol looked up. Do you hear that? Lycus, do we withdraw? Jofor shook his head. Too late. Look. A figure came around the curve of the track. He was clearly a legionary, but unarmored, with the welts crisscrossing his pale flesh. He staggered towards the defile with the salamanders booby traps waited. Now? Gosol produced the detonator switch, but Jofor held up his hand urgently. Wait! There's no traitor who runs before them. The sound of bikes built to a roar as the figure in night blue armor veered around the mountainside. He rode the narrow, uneven path with breathtaking skill. He He chased the stumbling figure, lashed him with his cruel whip, harsh laughter grating from his stylized helmet on ears. 4 other bikers followed. Lightning marks on their battle plates sullied with dry blood. Hatred boiled up Jofor's hearts. He looked at Gosol. The scout's face was flushed with excitement. Wait for the captive to get clear. The lone legionary was still within the blast zone, but the bikers were gaining on him. Any longer, and they too might escape the worst of it. Jofor felt his guts twist. Now, Gosol, now! It was a terrific explosion, the blast of multiple charges erupting out of the lengthening shadows. The leading Night Lord was hurled from the track like a doll, his bike plunging end over end down the steep mountainside. His followers skidded to a halt, frantically scanning through the clouds of obscuring dust to see what attacked them. Jofor surged forward, aiming for one traitor who had removed his helmet. He would pay dearly. A boiling jet of Promethium from Jofor's flame engulfed the warrior. He fell screaming from his mount, his burning flesh sloughing from his bones. The others spun their bikes and opened fire. Treachery had left their skills undimmed. Bolter shells tore up the rocky terrain, but Hyfast and Donok fired from impunity from cover. One Night Lord raised a plasma pistol before a bolter shot took him in the chest, and he slumped over his handlebars. There were 2 of the traitors left. One gunned his engine as his comrade intensified his fire, rearing up onto the hillside. Fishtailing madly, he rode his bike up the incline towards Jofor. He brought a chainsaw down at the salamander's head, but his bike slid sideways over the screes-covered slope, and he reached out to stay his fall. His hand never touched the ground. A bolt exploded within the trailer's gauntlets, spraying ruined flesh and metal, and the warrior fell. Jofor looked to his left. Brother Donok strode forward, his weapon held level in both hands. He advanced calmly on the fallen knight, putting a single shot through his eyelids. The last traitor swung his bike around to bring his twin bolters to bear, but Hyfast brought him down, blowing out his chest plate along with the ribcage it shielded. His silence was sudden and horrifying. The air stank of propellant and murder. Jofor wrinkled his nose. Well fought, brothers. 1,000 pinpricks we must bleed them. Died more easily than they deserved, Hyfast muttered, advancing warily between the bodies, and he turned to Gosol. Quickly now, young scout, striking fate in the stripped bodies. He went down to the dead. Donok, Gosol followed him, rifling through the saddlebags and nearest bike. Hyfast halted suddenly, doubling back towards them. What have I told you, young lad? Leave the gun. Take the nutrient packs and ammunition. He stopped to put a bolt in the head of a traitor who stirred. Night Lord bolts will fit a salamander's gun. Night Lord's water bottle will quench a salamander's thirst. Gosol seemed unsure. It feels wrong. These warriors were our cousins. They were raised up by the Emperor beside us. Their cause was our cause. Their Lord brother to our brother. And their Lord brother to our Lord. But now we are opposed. They are the enemy, and we are the righteous. Jofor did not hear his brother's words. He knelt beside the Night Lord's fallen victim, and his heart sank as he saw a fist-sized hole in the legionary's back. He rolled him over and saw an emblem of the Raven Guard tattooed on his shoulder. The legionary's eye fluttered. Jofor took him in his arms. I killed you, kinsman. The Raven Guard's eyes focused. Oh, brother, you've saved me. Do not weep. We weep for us all, my friend. Loyalists and traitor alike. To slay our own is no small thing, no matter the enormity of their crimes. They are our own no longer. Darkness has overtaken them. The legionary was racked with a bloody cough. Listen to me. You must fight on. Fight and survive. And you survive with us, Jofor urged. The Raven Guard smiled and meekly shook his head, his eyes closed. Jofor stayed with him until the weak beating of his heart ceased. When his brothers approached, Jofor pointed to the mountain peaks high above the trail. He did not speak. In that moment, he did not trust the authority of his voice. As they made their way from the ambush, he went to one of the Night Lord's corpses. With his knife, he scratched the mark of his legion into the warrior's greave. The work was rapid, but fine. A dragon's head of pure silver, scored roaring outrage against the betrayal. Let them see, Jafar muttered. Let them see that the shadows of Isfahan harbor the flames of vengeance, and that those will burn them all. He then departed, following his brothers away from the traitors' inevitable pursuit. That was Strike and Fade, Guy Haley, Legacies of Betrayal. And our last story tonight, War Master by John French. War Master. The word hung in the silence as it left Horus's lip. Beyond the high crystal flex windows, the light of distant stars hung in sickly folds of gas and dust. Armored and enthroned, the Primarch of the 16th Legion gazed into the shadows as though waiting for an answer. The title is heavy around my neck. Horus, Lupercal, son, father, friend, enemy. All are lost beneath the weight of that one word. He turned his head, looking to the black iron arms of the throne. His eyes moved over the bronze of the mace as tall as a mortal man. It was called the World Breaker, and he accepted it from his father's hand along with the title of War Master and command of the Great Crusade. His gaze came to rest upon the eagle-headed pommel. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Our father never spoke of what it meant, only the limits of its authority. Dangerous word to leave unqualified. Perhaps he intended me to discover its meaning. Perhaps he did not care what it meant, as long as it freed him from us, his sons. Perhaps he did not know what it would mean for his imperium. Horus raised his hand. A column of holographic light filled the air before the throne. Shapes of men and women formed in grainy projection. Twisting, shouting, dying, their pleas and screams looping over and over as the thunder of bolter fire roared through the silence. He knows now, he nodded to himself. The reflected light of the hololith reflecting across the liquid black of his eyes. The fire is lit, and all is cast to the wind. We are committed, he and I, my brothers and our legions, all humanity's future, bound together in this circle of blood. We are the storm now. The Imperium will fall and rise by my hand, or fall and fall and fall. Slowly, he stood, his armor whispering, clicking. He gestured again, and more cones of cold light surrounded him, turning with images of blind faces. Some screamed with words and blood, smoke spewing forth from their mouths, while others droned on in their dead, monotonous voices. Horus inclined his head, listening. All is blood, the screams of change. Anarchy is this age's king. We fall apart, and this war slips from our fingers to spin into oblivion. He said, his voice clear even over the cacophony. Horus turned and watched the holographic recordings bloom around him. The throne room danced with the ghost light of 1,000 messages. Isfahan was supposed to burn in silence so that our war could be won before it truly began. The angel's wings were meant to be broken at my feet, and still the failures come tumbling one over the other, on and on. He paused, his eyes fixed upon the image of a shrunken astropath. Calth burned, yet our brother lives. Rebute, wise Rebute. Rebute with his scratching quills, his plans and his hopes. Too understanding, too strong, too damn perfect. Horus let out a long breath and turned his back to his empty throne. I wish he was with us. The flick of his finger blades, the throng of images vanished, and silence flowed back with the returning shadows. Horus shook his head, his eyes fixing upon his throne. Would you say I listened too much to Alpharius and Logar? That a war fought with deceit is doomed to fail? Perhaps you would be right. The Hydra does not see it all. And now his blindness places a knife at his own back. Korax would have not made such an error. He did, a mirthless laugh. Strange, is it not, that I wish so many beside me stand against me, and while at my back are only the bawd and the damaged. I'm a master of broken monsters. Slowly he begins to circle the edge of the great hull of the table, the sound of his footsteps lost in the echoing silence. I cannot control them, or their sons, and they know it. Moritarian, Perturabo, and the rest, they can all feel it. They all know that this war is no longer something that can be guided, only written out. But they never understood me. Not truly. They understand less with each passing second. They doubt. They think I've lost my way. I can see it in their hearts. The pettiness, the pride, the seeds of ruin driving them on, feeding the tempest. With such creatures, I must remake the future. He stopped again at the foot of his throne and reached out. His hand closed around Worldbreaker's haft. With casual ease, he raised it up so that the chamber's thin light caught every dent and scar upon the polished metal. 1,000 battles, 10,000, 10 times, 10 times, 10,000, to bring about the new age. All of the certainties of the past torn down, all the beliefs that made them turn to ash, war on every front, stretched across time until none can know when the final blow will come. There is no disaster, for all disasters serve me alone. The storm rises, so that only the thunderbolt may fall. He looked down at the throne again, shaking his head sadly. His arm relaxed, and Worldbreaker rested at his side. His gaze shifted, as though he were looking at something beyond what lay in front of him. No other would have dared this, not even you. Perhaps that's why our father chose me. Perhaps that was his only moment of honesty. Then his gaze focused and hardened. Black eyes like reflected pools in a face of an unforgiving king. Upon the throne, the skull of Ferrus Manus stared back at him, with empty eye sockets that had once contained his fierce eyes. A thin, fractured web of cracks ran alongside the perfect dome of the slain Primarch's crown, spiraling back to a splintered pit into its temple. Even reduced to polished bone, the skull seemed to radiate strength and defiance. It doesn't matter how the galaxy burns, only that it does. War Master. That's what it means, my brother. Strength to do what must be done. That was War Master by Jonathan French from Legacies of Betrayal. Ave Imperata, Gloria Excelsis Terra.